live now, Kathy. Thanks everyone for joining us on this Friday. It's a little bit rainy here in Massachusetts. Hopefully it's lovely where you are. I hope everyone is staying healthy. This is the second in a series of conversations with Northeastern Law graduates who are doing interesting and valuable work during this pandemic. Today's guest is Kathy Morris, class of 75. She's a leading career coach based in Chicago. She owns her own firm called Under Advisement. I'm going to share a bit about Kathy's background, and then I will ask her some questions. We did ask people if they had questions in advance, and I do have a few for Kathy that came from recent grads and I believe a 3L student. So here's Kathy's background. Kathy is a national career counselor for lawyers and law students through her private practice called Under Advisement. She graduated from Northeastern Law in 1975 and from the University of Michigan in 1971. After handling career cases in courtrooms from Massachusetts to Hawaii, which was lovely, and directing the Career Services Office at Northwestern Law School, where she was also a faculty member over the years, teaching legal ethics, Kathy opened up Under Advisement in 1988 to help lawyers and law students find jobs and enjoy satisfying careers. She also created a career resource center for the ABA in 2000 and the ABA Legal Career Center in 2015. She's the featured career counselor for the Chicago Bar Association's Career Advancement Program and is the 2020 member of the Forbes Coaches Council, Kathy is also an innovator in attorney professional development, most recently creating a comprehensive lawyer training platform for Sidley Austin. She founded the Chicago Law Firm Training Consortium and was a charter board member of the Professional Development Consortium. She's a frequent speaker, author, and served on the advisory board, where I got to know her, of the Northeastern Law School Women in the Law Conference for 10 years. You can follow Kathy on Twitter at Lawyer Counselor and view her newest offering, which is called Just a Minute, which is 1-minute videos answering professional development questions. She can also be reached at www.underadvisement.com. Today, Kathy, I would like to just ask you a few questions regarding recommendations for attorneys that potentially have been laid off or maybe are looking for their next step, but or maybe a few 2019s that have not yet been hired. I'd also like to ask you a little bit about your experiences in 08 and 09 and how that compares to today's market and what kind of fallout from this pandemic might be anticipated. But first, give me a little background for you. Tell me how Chicago is faring with COVID-19.
Well, I think Chicago's doing a great job with our mayor and our state governor through Illinois. So we have a good amount of cases and so forth and hospitalizations and whatnot, but we're reopening in a phased way starting today. And I'm very hopeful that they're going to find the vaccine and we're all going to move forward at some point.
Great. How did you find your calling as a legal career counselor? How did that come to be?
That's a good question. I think what happened was, now I practiced law coming out of law school. It was criminal law, and I went to one of my first co-op jobs after law school, which was a fun fact, in Honolulu. And then I came back home to Chicago, and I was, after practicing as a federal defender, I was asked to come over to Northwestern Law School and teach, and then run the placement office, which is what they called it at the time. I noticed two things when I was doing that, and it really led me to Under Advisement and to professional development. And the two things were that the alums were coming back into the law school asking for career advice. At that time, it was the beginning of large law firms starting to lay off associates. That was kind of a new and shocking thing to happen at that time. And alums were coming in, and I realized they needed career advice as much as law students or more. And I also saw that they had chosen their firms, they said, because not only did they have loans to pay off, but because they thought they'd get great training for a few years. But they said there wasn't any. And I didn't think that sounded right. I didn't think that sounded fair. I didn't think that we could continue well that way. So I got involved in trying to help figure out what lawyer training would look like at a law firm.
Fantastic. Tell me what you did exactly at Sidley Austin and how you might carry some of that that you learned there with you today.
Okay, well, at Sidley, what I did was I was their first chief training and development officer, and took some of the great things they already had, of course, over the years, and some of the great champions in the partners and senior associates who were champions of training and mentoring, and created a curriculum of courses and of offerings. Some of them even then were online and virtual, though we didn't use Zoom, because it was a national, of course, ultimately global platform. So some of the courses were even for summer associates, but it ranged all the way up to partners. And what I saw was that lawyers really do want to learn across the spectrum. They do want jobs that are sophisticated and challenging and rewarding in every way. They want to learn. And I think that's a wonderful reason why a lot of us got into the law, because we do like being caught up in the world of thought and applying it to our practices, both in substantive ways and in ways that have to do with learning how to write better, all the way through learning how to edit better, learning how to develop business, learning how to be a leader. It really is a broad range of subject matters that we tackled. And I think it was the way I carry it forward is that when I counsel individuals who tell me, for example, that they just don't have training at their firms, I can suggest to them some of the kind of things they can perhaps suggest and sort of differentiate themselves in their firms, and how they can even work with the people who are in charge of the training and development to be sure that they get what they want out of their years and time at the law firm.
Sure. Now, it was global. Did you travel globally, and did your training differ in different countries?
Well, at the time when I started it, because again, this platform was the ground up, I mostly concentrated on the national, and I traveled to all their national offices. I don't know that I traveled internationally at the time, but the team carried that on and really took I think we were starting to work with maybe London and a couple other offices. And then I had told them that, because they created the role around me at the time, which was wonderful. And I told them that I thought that I could get them where they needed to be with a solid foundation. And I said 2 or 3 years at the time. And then I'm always in favor of succession planning, that I would choose my successor and that it would be a team that would persist. And it's worked out beautifully that way. I stayed 4 years only because after 3, I said that I think I'd done what I came to do. And they asked me to stay another year. And of course, I think a lot of times in my career, and maybe in yours and others, people listening should recognize this. Sometimes you're just really asked to do something. You're asked, even in the context of a favor or in the context of staying a little longer, doing a little more. And I find that the answer to that, if you can, should be yes.
That's great. So I'm taking a step back in time. Did you always know you wanted to be a lawyer when you were at Michigan? Did you think that was the goal, the end goal?
Well, I was in Michigan in the late 60s and early 70s. And, there weren't a lot of women lawyers at the time, and there certainly were no lawyers in my family. So no, I hadn't thought about it. What I had assumed, being a sociology major, is that I would become a social worker. And then through the era that I was living, I realized that perhaps there was more I could do, and I could stretch, and I could forge, and I could take forward. And so what I did was I applied to both law school and social work school. And when I got into law school, I remember walking around my little apartment saying, I can be a lawyer. It was really a challenge for me because it was all new. I didn't know what law school was about, but I learned in the best possible way.
Well, we're so glad you did, and so glad you came to us. My next question is, do you have specific thoughts for our students as they navigate the next year or two? If they're currently graduating and potentially can't take the bar right away, it's been postponed in our state. I'm not sure about your state right now. What should they be doing in the upcoming months after May 20th or graduation date?
So current third years who would then be graduating.
Yeah.
Some of them from our law school would still be affiliated with some of their co-op employers. That's one of the great advantages of Northeastern, that up until now you've had 4 co-op employers, and in the future I understand it will be 3, and yet you've got more of a network than many law students feel that they do. So I believe that it's important to look for work. And one of the obvious places is to talk to your co-ops and see if they could use you into the undefined future as things change. Another thing is to talk to the professors, to obviously work with the co-op office and so forth, and try to talk with alums. Do what you can to be creative, to find work. And that, by the way, is something that in the profession many lawyers do now. Look for transitional or interim jobs. They look for contract jobs. It's not the kind of stigma that it was in the past. Now the profession's getting and has gotten more flexible. So you should, as a graduating law student, feel comfortable to get all the information you can and just go forth and keep trying to find that work. And if you have to do it without pay, and you can, I mean, I know we don't want to, if you can do that, I encourage you to be as flexible and nimble and creative as possible in making your way, those are some of the characteristics, I think, of Northeastern law students.
Great. A related question is from a 2021 student, so not this year, but next. I would appreciate hearing your thoughts about the best way to navigate postgraduate opportunities with many summer programs being canceled or remote. What is the best time reaching out to employers for students who are trying to land a position outside of a firm or company's usual summer recruiting process?
So would this person be looking for the summer job, the upcoming summer or fall job?
Yes.
As co-op?
Probably next, yeah.
Right.
Looking for next summer's role.
Right. Well, clearly, I think the school is going to continue to support and foster the relationships and the outreach and the creation of new jobs, and looping back to old co-ops and seeing what there might be. I think if you can be geographically flexible as a
Right.
law student and open up the markets even more widely, I think that's smart for 2 reasons. One, because sometimes it's in the rural areas or it's in the states that you don't live in that there might be opportunity, but also because you never know what you're really gonna want to do when you graduate. I know that I had several ideas on the way through law school about what kind of lawyer I'd be, and where I would live and where I would practice. And I took advantage of the different geographies and the different possibilities, the size of employer. And so I would encourage you to do that too. Just keep an open mind. Don't necessarily think you have to work a certain place, even if you wanted to work at a big firm and they've changed their hiring practices for the summer. Smaller firms not necessarily, or government offices, or as you mentioned, other sectors. So I don't want you to assume the worst. I want you to hope for the best, and I want you to work toward that. Because what we want is for things to stay as normalized as possible. And it's pretty hard to know what's going to happen, that far ahead. We're hoping that things will be back to great shape.
Was Hawaii, did you work in Hawaii after your co-op there, or did you only do a co-op there? I wasn't sure if you worked.
No, I did a co-op there. One of my classmates had developed the co-op. A lot of people, as you know, even then were going to Alaska and still are, but nobody had gone to Hawaii. So one of my classmates developed a job at a small criminal firm and then decided it didn't pay enough. In those days, we had to be paid, that it didn't pay enough for him. So he was one time standing outside my classroom doing the hula and pointing at me. Like, could we talk later? But I did end up going, and it was wonderful. And then I did go back after law school and stayed another couple of years. So it was not a place for me to stay for all time to settle, but it was a terrific initial job where I got a lot of experience hit the ground running, as they say.
Yes,
I mean, it was absolutely
definitely
invaluable.
geographically diverse. So that was about as far away as you could
It
possibly
was, I
get
still,
from Boston.
you know, when you talk about this pandemic era and trying to, think about wellness and mindfulness, often a lot of times still what I think about is the walk from where I was living to the bus with the flowering trees and the smells, and then out onto the office, because it's very relaxing. Even that long ago, I mean, I'm a transcendental meditator. I meditate every morning. I have since law school, frankly. When I was co-oping in Washington, D.C., and I realized, this profession is not simple. I think I need some tools to sort of, help me in the long term and help with my creativity and my focus. So I meditate, but I also, still think of that walk in Honolulu.
Yes.
Isn't it funny all these years later?
I can remember the smells of Hawaii. I grew up on the West Coast, Oregon, and that's where you went on vacation, typically, was Hawaii. And I can conjure up the smells of Hawaii quite often. And there's something incredibly soothing about that.
True.
My next question is, Northeastern Law is known to have a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. And building off of that, what might you think are the top 3 characteristics that maybe 2018s and 2019s might want to demonstrate if they've potentially been laid off or furloughed? What are some characteristics that would help them?
Ingenuity. As you say, we're innovative, but in order to have a fresh idea that's creative, that has value, you have to allow yourself to believe that you can come up with something that would make sense. And then be ingenious about letting those thoughts come and taking them seriously. So I would say ingenuity. I would say flexibility, as I mentioned, because the more you expand your framework in terms of what kind of law you might want to do, what kind of employer you might want to have, what kind of geography you might want to reside in, you're opening up all kinds of opportunities. So ingenuity, flexibility, and I think, our fortitude in being trailblazers and whatnot, our fortitude in making a choice that wasn't necessarily one that we, when we were smaller, thought about, but having the fortitude to follow through on who you are and how you can help others with the law. Those would be some of the key traits.
Those are wonderful. You definitely have all 3. And I know that from knowing you for over 15 years, but yeah, sticking to it, sticking to your guns, remaining true to who you are, but also being flexible and being able to pivot. We've all had to pivot during this pandemic in multiple ways, and being able to do that and try to do that with grace and humor and, flexibility is just so key in today's world. And I think it will remain so post-pandemic. My next question for you is, what professional organizations or groups might current students or recent grads, or anyone actually at any point in their career, join to assist with their job searches?
Well, I definitely am a huge advocate for bar associations, for the American Bar Association, and for your local bar association. It might be more than one. It might be a state bar association. It might be a local city bar association. I'm definitely a proponent for you to join the bar associations. And I think, these days there's tuition waivers and free, dues opportunities, which you want to really follow, but not only be a passive member in name only, but be active. Join a couple of the committees and go to the meetings. I even say that you should see in any organization you join, you should see about the possibility, even from a very junior stage, of being, a bit of an emerging leader. And here's an example of what you can do. It's very true, though people don't always realize this, that bar associations are always looking for content. Most organizations are looking for fresh content. And so if you're on a committee of a subject matter committee of your kind of law, for example, and you offer to moderate a program at an upcoming meeting, and that way you don't have to be the subject matter expert because you're not yet, but you can invite a couple people from the committee or outside the committee or beyond the law and business if you're interested in that direction. And then you're kind of leading this conversational program and taking a few notes about some of the highlight points, and then making some postings or writing a little Q&A article and getting that published in a legal journal. They're always looking for content, both in print and in person or virtually these days. So don't think that it's way too difficult or they would never want you because you're too junior. That's exactly the time to step up. You'll get a lot of notice and acclaim, and it'll really set you on a path for just not being a passive participant in anything that you do from there.
I love that. And you could invite as speakers, if they're looking for a panel, someone that you want to get to know a little better, or someone that you're
Absolutely.
interested in making a connection with. So that's a real in for them to be able to network in a different way, in a way that's flattering to someone or appealing to someone. But I know you're very involved with the Chicago Bar Association and you do all kinds of trainings, etc. So I thought that would be one that you would say, but I thought we should just reiterate that it is a good time. I know they often do waive fees for students and possibly people that may have been laid off or furloughed. So definitely it's a time to explore what freebies there might be in a local bar association.
I agree. And especially if you're looking to work in a jurisdiction where you're not currently living while you're in school or just afterward, if you have a transition job.
Right.
Getting to know by distance the leaders of the committees in which you'd be interested, even though you're not living there yet, is a way to really reach out and to have sort of a introduction to the bar and the practice and to make some networking contacts and to ask about what are the best places to look for opportunities. There's, for example, in Chicago, there's the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin, which is now online, and you can get I think a very short-term, very low cost or no cost subscription, and they have ads and postings. And don't forget about using another law school's placement office. You can choose one, you can have the reciprocity arranged from school to school. And I think that's a great boon because then you can get on the local lists that are pushed out of opportunities in those local arenas. So I think, to talk to your co-op office and to talk to the professors and to really focus on Northeastern's resources is terrific. And then to think creatively about supplementing.
Right. And I'm sure a lot of the bar associations are doing virtual events right now. So even if you didn't live in that city that you were targeting, you might be able to arrange something completely virtually with some of your contacts from law school or beyond, or in the city where you want to be. So there's some ways to be even more creative and not have to be there right in person right now. So that's all.
Absolutely. And sometimes the bars will charge you a little something for a program if you're not a member, but I would encourage you during this time to contact the staff in charge of the CLE or the offerings. Tell them about yourself and ask if you could have a time-limited pass to their programming, because you're either thinking about moving or you've heard that they have terrific CLE or whatever it is that is the case. Don't shy away just because there's a charge, even if small. I know to us, a lot of us now, even a small charge is a big charge. So don't be hesitant to ask. When you're practicing law, if you're in a private sector, you're going to have to get used to dealing with money and asking for payment and setting fees and whatnot. And so I know that we're less comfortable at times about asking for a discount or asking for a complimentary arrangement, but I encourage you to wade into those waters because I think it carries over into good practice and good life skills.
Perfect. We both have lived through the 08 and 09 economic downturn and know that life holds many twists and turns. What were you doing at that time, and what experience do you have that you could share with our graduates who are now living through COVID-19, and maybe talk a tiny bit about resiliency and what that means from your perspective?
Well, interestingly, I had started working with Sidley at the end of '07.
Ooh,
And so what Sidley, I had been teaching law school at the time, and I had been also running Under Advisement. I had done all those things simultaneously until then. And since it was such a large job at Sidley that they needed me to focus on, they asked me, in '07, can you please put aside the other things you're doing and really concentrate on us? So I put Under Advisement on a hiatus. So in '07 and '08 and '09, I wasn't, trying to get clients, and
yeah,
I wasn't teaching at law schools. And so I was fortunate to kind of, in some measure, sit out that recession, but only in some measure, because that's when the firms really started to realize, well, our internal budgets really may need to be adjusted. And in some ways, I had to be more capable with a little fewer resources. And that's always a good lesson. The pendulum will often swing, and from employer to employer, as to whether they'll pay for an outside speaker to come in or not. And Sidley was very generous, but in those years, and with the new platform starting, I was careful to diversify in terms of the financial output. And so what I would say to people now is that, and we always see that the professions are cyclical. I mean, this was not the only downturn I've seen. And so I would say that I left Sidley, and actually I took an entire year off, because not only was it 2012, 2011, 12-ish, and I could, I just thought that timing in some ways is everything, if you can take that into account. So I waited to reopen Under Advisement. So I think being strategic and being careful and being not only fortunate but frugal when you are working, so that you do have reserves, and so you can make some choices. I know
right.
that we often would come out with a lot of debt, school debt, so it's hard at many occasions. I understand, but I think I would encourage the use, if it's available, of family resources, because a lot of people shy away from that or think it comes at such a cost. Being a mom now, I really believe that, family members and friends want to help. We learn this in the downturns. We want to do what we can for each other. So if there's available resources, somewhere to you, I would consider and not shy away, because it'll leave you a little more freedom to do the things you really want to do, as you can develop them and make them happen, as opposed to being unhappy, taking just the first thing that whizzes past you. And I understand sometimes you have to do that, but you don't have to do that always. So just make a decision as to what your circumstances really are or could be.
So life is cyclical. It does go up and down. And we've seen that a few times. The early 90s weren't great. And then '08 and '09 were certainly harsh. So with a little bit of patience and a little bit of perseverance, I think we will come out of this different, maybe a little bit different after this pandemic. I think things will work differently, and we'll look at things differently.
Well,
Do
you
you?
asked about resilience. I
Yeah.
didn't answer you.
Okay.
That's a concept that I think people could read about. There's science and business literature about resilience. And what really is most important in terms of learning how to be resilient is to be able to be positive. And there are lawyers who've gone and gotten degrees in positive psychology, and who study the lawyer brain, and who write about resilience and positivity. And you can Google for them and look them up, and they sometimes make videos like I do that you can access and read their articles. The more you can learn about resiliency, as opposed to just wishing you were resilient, I think the more you can harness the components of it. And some of them we wouldn't think about as lawyers, like being able to have humor in our lives. There's
Absolutely.
and about sort of pulsing between expending energy and recharging. There's a lot of knowledge about these things. And so you don't have to feel that you're without information ever. And you can pick and choose what resonates best with you. But the resiliency is the ability to be in the present and to bounce back for quickly, hopefully, from setbacks, and emotionally and mentally to be on a positive trajectory and to be able to have that positive sort of talk running through your cycle in the brain, and knowing that you can make your way in your career. That's why I do what I do, to help people realize that things about themselves that they're too close to realizing, what their strengths are, how to deal with any weaknesses or challenges they think they have, because they're surmountable always, always. But when it's you and you're so close to it, you can get caught, especially with the lawyer brain, in the ruminating and the worrying. And when you do that, honestly, your brain cannot help you be resilient. So you get caught in a cycle. You have to know how to break.
Perfect. Do you have a final takeaway that we might want to share with folks, Kathy? Or did we cover it all? You could
Well,
tell me.
no, I think it's important to know, and this is why a lot of people chose Northeastern, that you can enjoy your career, that you're not going to enjoy every minute or every day, that there are going to be bosses that are difficult. There are going to be people that cross your path that make it challenging, whether it's a client or it's a colleague or it's an opposing counsel. But the fact is, overall, the trajectory is good, and you can really get what you came for in the law, which is satisfaction to make change, help individuals or organizations, and really make a difference now and going forward. So that's really what I guess I would leave people with. I can't believe we're done, because that really went quickly. And I'm thanking you, Mielle, for inviting me. It's good to see you, even if virtually, and to see the law school in the background. I think that would be the thought with which I would leave y'all.
That's perfect. I always enjoy talking to you, Kathy. I leave a little lighter. I leave thinking that anything that might be thrown my way, I can handle. I learned not to ruminate. I learned a lot of things today. If anyone wants to reach Kathy, you could email her at kathy@underadvisement.com. You can follow her on Twitter. Remind me what your Twitter handle is one more time, Kath.
@LawyerCounselor.
@LawyerCounselor. Thank you for spending time with us today. It's always good to see you virtually, in person, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, Kathy.
You as well.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today.